what is 360 video? So 360 video, it's exactly what it says. It's a full 360 view of a scene. So what's happening? The cameras are capturing that full scene in full 360. So it's not like a traditional 2D capture where the director or the DOP controls what you're looking at. It's actually capturing everything. So there's nowhere to hide for 360 video. It's a very interesting space and takes a little bit of thinking to get your head around. I'll show you a camera here. So that there is a 360 camera. So it's two fisheye lenses. It's two really wide angle lenses that's capturing the whole scene, everything from underneath to above to every angle around. And what that means, it means the viewer can then choose where to look and what to look at. Now, today's chat could be contentious. It's not true VR. There's two schools of thoughts. VR is, the traditional school of thought with VR is computer generated 3D models, kind of like video game worlds. They'd call that true VR. So this is 360 video, but it's adaptable to that VR technology. So Oculus Rift, Samsung Gear, and a range of other VR platforms as well. But the great thing about it, it's a fantastic way to show real spaces. So it's not a made up fantasy space, it's a real space. So I think this opens up some great opportunities for the likes of being stuck in COVID now. So there's some examples here on this slide where we've got real spaces being shown and having virtual tours done by the likes of the British Museum. We've got the Sistine Chapel there. There's some links that you can have a look in the final presentation. And the National Air and Space Museum. These are three really great examples on how they're using 360 VR video for virtual tours. Now, if everything's working here, I wanted to just show you the National Air and Space Museum. So this is a 360 scene. So this is after it's been shot. It's on YouTube and it's easy to be viewed by anyone on any device. And YouTube makes it really easy on a mobile. This is desktop, but on mobile, there's a button there to turn it into full VR mode. But as you can see, it's super easy just to look and explore that whole scene. So it's not just pointing a camera in one direction and going, yay, look at that part of the space rocket. It's thinking about in your pre-production that whole 360 scene. So it's probably a little bit more like theatre, really. So we've got that full scene on stage for theatre. Now, as mentioned, there's some different production approaches. So I think in that pre-production planning phase, you've got to really think about what you want to show, what things you don't want to show. And there's some technical considerations around lighting, what have you as well. Because a traditional camera setup, you're just exposing for one scene versus 360. One side of the frame might be really, really bright and one side might be really dark. Now, here's a couple 360 cameras. They look like alien tech. There's a few here. There's a couple top left. That's a device that you can just plug in and start using your mobile straight away. We've got one that looks like a deep sea creature. It's an older 360 rig. So 360 video and video capturing has been around sort of 5, 6, 7 years now. But now it's a nexus of technology, fantastic broadband speeds, and the cost of some of the technology is starting to come down. So previously you needed really expensive gear, really expensive computers to play it back, really expensive headsets. So now it's a lot more accessible. And the form factors come down quite a bit. Top right there, you can see a 360 camera stuck on a drone to open up 360 aerial applications. And people are also putting them on small remote control cars. So that means you can then drive a remote control camera or a remote control car through a space and just get this beautiful, seamless walkthrough. So there's a few different ways to access and capture 360. It's only up to your imagination. Well, there's a couple there at the bottom. So what 360 is, bottom left, you can see it's really using a range of different camera angles to capture that full scene. So early on, people would stitch together 4, 6, 8, 24 GoPros. They'd build those into a rig, and then in post-production, you'd have to stitch together 4, 6, 8, 24 camera angles. But now the stitching's usually done in camera. Bottom left there, the one with it looks like an alien robot or a K9 robot from Doctor Who. That's the new gen cameras. They'll do the stitching inside the camera itself. So once you get to post-production, you can just start editing. And on the last two slides there, there's a few ways you can capture 360. So some people are still doing it with the likes of A7 IIIs and what have you. They're matching the lenses, they're matching the settings, doing a lot of testing, but then in post-production, they're doing that stitching. And stitching was traditionally a really big barrier. A couple of examples of some rigs here. We're going to go from expensive rig down to accessible entry-level rigs. So I looked at this, researched this rig a few years ago. It's something that would be used for, think of probably less so in Australia, but top-end global sports, so NBA, NFL. So I think the US, where they're putting billions of dollars into sponsorship deals and distribution rights and subscription numbers. This is 17 cameras filming in 12-bit RAW 444. So what that just means, it's capturing the highest possible footage at the highest possible rate. So in post-production, you've got the most ability for color correction or exposure correction or scaling, but there's going to be huge files. So something like 5 to 10 terabytes per hour just to capture with that device. So the whole post-production pathway is going to be very expensive, very complicated, and going to take a lot of top-end gear. And I actually think the days of this type of rig, unless it's a Discovery Channel or some sort of avatar type motion picture, I don't think we're going to see these used as much anymore. I think it's going to be more about these mid-level rigs. So there is some pricing available for these. This is the Insta360. I think it's called the Pro 2. So it's got 6 lenses. So once again, same concept. It's just stitching 6 lenses. It's just mounting 6 lenses onto a body. And then inside, it's capturing 6 different angles and stitching it for you. So that post-production will be easy to manage. These can also support 3D 360, so that's kind of cool. You can get a sense of depth. We haven't explored that, produced that yet. We filmed an 8K 360 VR, but it depends on that use case. We haven't found anything compelling to physically use 3D on. We're keeping the eyes and ears out for the next opportunity, but it hasn't come up yet. But the great thing is this has a lot of connectivity. So all those antennas mean it can connect to your mobile there. You can live stream from it. So there's a range of great ways for you to monitor your signal, monitor your footage, monitor the scene and audio, and make sure that you're getting the optimum results. It's really interesting, and it's a very interesting place to be when working with talent as well. So you want to plan that 360 scene and brief your talent well in advance to make sure they're standing in the right spot or pointing to the right things to give the right cues. And the key thing is it's a bit more of a streamlined workflow, but at 8K, it's still moving a lot of data around. This is a great high-res 360/VR solution, mountable on drones, cars, remote control cars, what have you. This is the exciting piece. So this is an Insta360 Pro as well. There's a range of different brands. Ricoh does a brand, GoPro's got a brand out now. These are just the ones we've been using and we're familiar with. They all do similar things and the principles are pretty much the same. So for between $400 to $700, that's Aussie dollars, you can start filming 5.7K 360 VR or be taking 18 megapixel 360 photos. So once again, remote monitoring. In this instance, it's got 2 lenses similar to what we looked at before. It's those 2 fisheye lenses that are then stitched in camera. It's got a great easy to use app that you just tether to your mobile phone. And you can live stream from it. That's the other great thing. So you can live stream from this to a suitable platform. So you can live stream from here, from the Insta360. You can live stream into YouTube or to Facebook. A really great tool. But once again, just beware, shooting and streaming in some of those large resolutions, you're going to be using a lot of data and you're going to be having some maybe some broadband or mobile phone plan issues depending on what sort of data plan you're on. But it's a really great entry-level piece of gear and it's super high quality. So now's a real nexus of the technology getting powerful and affordable. We're getting great broadband connections and we're stuck at home with COVID. So people are starting to watch and enjoy more 360 VR content. Okay, the technology's not quite perfect. We can see here inside that red box, if you look closely, because it has a range of lenses, in this instance 2, there will be some stitch marks because it has to stitch and coordinate and collaborate or calibrate those images to be seamless. So it's not quite seamless yet. There's some ways you can reduce this in post-production. You can manually start to match and what have you in After Effects or Premiere Pro. But that's going to take a lot more time. But at the moment, with these two lens setups, there is a little bit of a trade-off. But I think they're doing a really great job. So it's just a matter of, if there is a stitch line, plan your scene around that, get a preview and make sure the stitch line's not maybe on someone's face or a key piece of area of focus in that scene, whether it's the front of a building or a sign or what have you. I said it can also be hard to handle mixed lighting. So one lens could be super bright, one lens could be super dark. So you're going to have a little bit of trouble starting to match those two scenes. So that's where that preview via the app on mobile phones is critical. You can play with your exposure. There's some manual exposure settings in video. There's always going to be a trade-off. You can't set left or right independently. There will be a little bit of a trade-off, and some of the devices will record those streams as 4 or 5 separate camera streams. So if you wanted to, you could come in and manually just grade each side of that scene or each lens of that scene. So if lens 1's really dark and lens 2's really light, in post-production, you can take some extra time to match those. But I said there's a trade-off there with turnaround times and equipment, and you start to get very technical quite quickly. And the great thing is they do support, it's quite common for them to support raw photos. So in that instance, if you've got a really dark and light scene, taking a HDR or a raw photo will allow you a little bit more breathing room to control exposure, whether it's in the app or in something like Photoshop. So there are a range of options. I said it's not quite perfect. You can get some lens flares and things. And being such a wide angle device, you can have some distortion and some stretching effects as you pan around the scene. So let's have a quick look at this isn't too bad. So they've planned their scene here with lots of space around the 360 camera. But if you had people in the scene or something up close, there can be some distortion lines. So straight lines can get a bit wonky. They've done a really great job here. That line's straight. And this is in low res. But yeah, there can be some funny distortions in there, so just be aware of that. You can't pull focus, so generally everything is in focus. And if you're walking or being mobile with these, there can be some vibration still. So a lot of them have inbuilt image stabilization. It's not perfect. It goes a great way to reducing some really jarring jitters, but just be aware of that. So if you wanted to take one of these handheld, do some testing and just be aware that those jitters for the viewer could be quite disruptive, might make them sick or ill, because the tech is still quite new for the viewers.